Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining. My name is Riley Vetterkind. I'm the Public Information Officer at the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Thanks for joining today's media availability. It's one of a few that we're hoping to conduct ahead of the November general election. Today we have Meagan Wolfe, the nonpartisan administrator of the Elections Commission and Wisconsin's chief election official, who will provide some opening remarks. She'll then take any questions from media members. I do want to just offer a reminder that the question and answer period is meant for media members only. If you have further questions after today's media availability, you can reach out to the public information inbox, that's electionspio@wisconsin.gov. Again, electionspio@wisconsin.gov. During the Q&A, and I'll repeat this afterwards, if you do have a question, please make sure to raise your hand and then we'll unmute you in the order that you raised your hand. As a reminder, if you're on your phone, you can press *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise or lower your hand, and I'll repeat that when we get to the Q&A section. With that, I'll hand things over to Administrator Wolfe.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the first of a series of media availabilities that we'll be conducting ahead of the November general election. So over the course of these availabilities, I'm hoping to provide you with some basic information about how the voting process works in Wisconsin so that you're best prepared to be able to cover Wisconsin's elections this year. So thank you to all of you for what you do and for covering the details and the mechanics about how Wisconsin elections work. First things first, today is an important deadline in Wisconsin. It's the last day to register to vote online or by mail for the general election. If a voter doesn't know if they're registered or if they think they might need to update their name or address, voters can find more information, check their registration status by going to the state of Wisconsin's official voter website, which is myvote.wi.gov. If you want to register online, the deadline is tonight at 11:59 p.m. To register online, you'll need a valid state of Wisconsin driver license or a state of Wisconsin ID card issued by the Wisconsin DMV. If you want to register by mail, registration applications need to be postmarked by today to the voter's municipal clerk, so they'll need to act quickly to use this option. Unfortunately, some voters have contacted our office after hearing false claims that voters who missed today's online registration deadline can't vote in November. This, of course, is false. You can still register to vote in your municipal clerk's office or at the polls on election day after today's deadline. So if you missed today's deadline to register online or by mail, again, you can still register to vote in your municipal clerk's office or at the polls on election day. For these options, voters will just need to remember that they need to bring with them a proof of residence document. So if you're registering to vote in person in the clerk's office over the next few weeks or at the polls on election day, voters will need to have something like a bank statement or a utility bill that has their current name and address on it. We also have another important deadline that's coming up next week. So beginning next Tuesday, October 22nd, voters will be able to cast an absentee ballot in their municipal clerk's office. This option is known as in-person absentee voting. And in-person absentee voting hours and locations, they do differ and are set by each of our 1,850 municipalities. So please check with your municipal clerk about the in-person absentee options that are available in your community. Most voters can also find their in-person absentee options on myvote.wi.gov, or at least you'll be able to find your municipal clerk's contact information at MyVote. A couple of other things that we've heard brewing, just for folks' information, is that election officials do continue to receive reports from voters who have received these third-party communications like text messages that they've described as intimidating or that contain false information. Unfortunately, many voters that receive these kind of communications during election season, and sometimes they can be misleading. And to avoid being misled by any sort of communication that might come from a third party to a voter, voters should make sure to get their election information from the official source. And the official sources for election information in Wisconsin are the State of Wisconsin Elections Commission, your municipal clerk in your city, town, or village, or your county clerk. A great place to start is by visiting myvote.wi.gov. Again, this is the state's official voter registration, voter information website. You can check your registration status there. You can find your polling place, look up your voter history, track your absentee ballot, and so much more. Drop boxes are another thing that we receive questions about, especially about the number of drop boxes in use across Wisconsin for this upcoming election and how that compares to previous elections. As was the case in 2020, there is not a requirement for municipalities or municipal clerks to use drop boxes, first of all, or to report their drop box locations to the Wisconsin Elections Commission. So just keep in mind that our data we have on the number of drop boxes is not comprehensive. It's just those jurisdictions that have reported drop boxes to us. So keeping in mind these limitations, the data that we have indicates that there are at least 78 drop boxes in use across Wisconsin. And how does this compare to 2020? In 2020, there were approximately 500 drop boxes in use for the presidential election. And I also want to point out, for the many years prior to the 2020 election, there were many additional drop boxes in use as well. The 6-member bipartisan elections commission did approve drop box guidance earlier this year that recommends best practices to really ensure that municipalities are choosing and maintaining secure drop box options for voters in their municipalities who may choose to use them. Moving on to absentee voting numbers and what we're seeing so far. So absentee voting continues to be a popular option for Wisconsin voters, although not to the extent that it was during the 2020 presidential election. As of Tuesday, there were about 562,644 absentee ballots that had been requested from the municipal clerks. Of those, 239,997 have already been returned to their municipal clerk. For comparison, at this point in 2020, there were more than 1.3 million absentee requests that had been filed with municipal clerks and more than 700,000 absentee ballots that had already been returned. There were ultimately about 2 million absentee ballots that were cast in the 2020 election. This data illustrates that absentee voting trends are beginning to look more like pre-2020 levels, although we'll of course need to wait until after the election and certainly after the in-person absentee voting process that starts next week to find out exactly what those numbers are and how they'll compare to previous elections. A couple of other Wisconsin sort of general election reminders. Many of you are probably aware of this, but I think it's always worth repeating that the upcoming presidential election is really an all hands on deck effort by all the communities in the state of Wisconsin. You know, it involves all of our 1,850 municipal clerks, all of our 72 county clerks, plus tens of thousands of poll workers across the state. Wisconsin is, as you know, the most decentralized election administration system in the country. As always, we encourage voters to make a plan for voting, to make sure you know what method you're going to use for registering or for casting your ballot. And also, for those who want to see how the process works firsthand, I really encourage folks to get involved, either through being a poll worker in your community or through observing the process. You can observe elections at any of the thousands of polling places around the state. You can even observe things like the pre-election tests of voting equipment that happen in each jurisdiction, the tally of absentee ballots, and even the audits that happen after election day. All of these things are happening in every community across the state. It's all publicly noticed and publicly observable. And again, Wisconsin has the most decentralized election system, meaning we have more city, town, and village clerks that register voters, issue absentee ballots than any other states. So folks who want to know more about the process, who have questions, who have concerns, there really is no excuse not to get involved directly with the process. Go see for yourself. If you have questions about specific election-related claims you come across in your reporting, please, always feel free to reach out to our office or to your local election official. Again, your local election official, they're the ones that are registering voters. They're the ones that are running the polling place on election day, issuing ballots. And so they're a great source of information to get that direct information from those localities. Another reminder is that WPC also maintains a fact-checking page where we provide accurate answers to frequently discussed or sort of trending topics about elections that might be subject to confusion. So if you go to elections.wi.gov, that's our agency website, and right on the homepage, you'll see fact checks. And when a new claim or something comes to our attention, we do look into these things, and we do provide information that you can refer to if you're also seeing those sorts of questions. So with that overview of kind of where we're at in the elections process, I'll turn it back over to you, and we'd be glad to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Administrator Wolfe. Again, we'll go to questions now. And just a reminder, questions are for media members only. If you are on your phone, you can press *6 to mute or unmute, and *9 to raise or lower your hand. The first question we'll go to is from Scott Bauer.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for doing this. On the drop boxes, the 78 number, is that 78 communities or 78 actual drop boxes? And how confident or unconfident are you that the number may be higher than that?
So it's 78 drop boxes is the data that we have in our system that's been reported to us by clerks. And I really don't know that that is a major underreporting to us. I think that a lot of communities have had some additional, considerations or pressures within their communities that may have led to whatever their decision might be. But I'd really encourage folks, if they have questions about a specific community and how they arrived at their decision, to reach out to them, because it really is the municipal clerk's decision to decide if it's an option that's right for their community. So I don't know if there are more than what has been reported to us, but I think that individual communities will know why they did or didn't choose that option.
And do you have a sense as to how many communities have them, if there are 78 actual drop boxes?
I think we do. And I actually believe we're going to be posting, if we haven't already, the list on our website. So you can actually find the list of the communities that have chosen them and how many that they have. So I don't have that in front of me, and I don't want to misstate it, but we will have that available for you all.
And that's correct. We do have that spreadsheet posted on our website under the elections tab on elections.wi.gov. So that there's a listing of all the drop boxes and the municipalities that they're located in.
And Riley, did I get that right? It's 78 drop boxes or 78 communities?
It's 78 drop boxes.
Okay.
It's correct, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Scott. And now we'll head over to Evan Casey.
Hi, thanks for doing this. When it comes to drop boxes, we've seen a lot of communities across the state, like Wausau making national news for choosing not to have them this year. Just what's your response to that? And what would you say to people who are concerned about, how secure they are for elections?
So the decision to have drop boxes or not, as our state Supreme Court said, is a decision that rests with the municipal clerk. And just like any decisions they make for their community, they have to weigh the considerations or the needs of their local community. And so I won't, undercut any of those decisions that have been made by our municipal clerks because they're making a decision, for their community and the best needs of their community. For places that have chosen to use drop boxes, they also have the guidance of the commission to help them in terms of going through how do they ensure that if they do use a Dropbox, that it's secure. It's secure from any sort of, tampering with the ballots or tampering with the box itself. And so I think that if clerks do go through that list of security recommendations as they're considering their options, I think we should have a great deal of confidence that that is a secure option if a voter chooses and feels comfortable with that return option. Another piece of great news is that voters have multiple choices to decide how they want to receive and return their ballot. So voters can choose in some communities drop boxes if those are available. You can also return your ballot in person to your clerk, or you can return it by mail. Other folks may decide that they prefer to do in-person absentees so that they can complete everything and turn it over to their clerk right in the office on the same day. And others prefer election day. So I think that voters have a lot of choices to make. And I think that we have a lot of really great secure options here in the state of Wisconsin that allow people to make the decision that's best for them.
And then one follow-up to, I recently talked to the president of the Wisconsin Municipal Clerks Association. She said that, she was a little bit worried about this year, given all the extra eyes in the polls from poll watchers, election observers about possible conflicts at the polls because of, different parties. Is that something that you've heard as well? And I guess what's your response to that?
So municipal clerks, poll workers, our county clerks, we have all been thinking about and training for and exercises plans for contingencies, for the last 4+ years. And so I don't think that any of us think that there's a reason to believe or information out there that shows that, folks are going to conduct themselves differently at the polls on election day this year. But if there is some type of disruption at the polls on election day, our clerks have contingency plans in place that they not only have developed, but that they exercise on a regular basis to make sure that they're ready for whatever challenges might come our way. And so I think everybody's heading into election day thinking that we're going to have a great election day, that, observers are an important part of the process. Our clerks want them to come to the polls and be a part of observing the election process. And I think that, our hope is and our expectation is that everybody, conducts themselves in accordance with law. But if there is something unexpected, that there are contingency plans and clerks do have the resources to be able to manage unexpected challenges.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. And we'll now go to Soraya Sandlin from WISN. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly.
No, you're fine. Yeah, it's Syria. Hi, thank you so much, Megan, for doing this. I want you to elaborate. You mentioned before that your office has been getting a lot of calls from people concerned that they're not going to be able to vote if they miss this registration deadline today. Can you just kind of explain that?
Sure. So it sounds like there are some voters that may have received text messages. Sometimes folks get things in the mail from third-party groups that just aren't accurate, and I won't speak to because I don't know the intents of some of these groups. But we really want voters to know that if they're faced with questionable information about the elections, if they're faced with conflicting information about the elections, that you should go to the official source. I get very frustrated when these groups send out information and they don't get the facts right because it confuses voters. And so I tell voters, let's just cut through all of that noise, go right to the official source. If you're seeing questionable information, let's just ignore that, go to the official source, which is your local clerk, your county clerk, your state election official, or you can go to myvote.wi.gov and that will tell you, what election official in your community you can contact to get your questions answered. So, I think that every election, especially presidential elections, we see third-party groups that send text messages, that send mailings, that send all sorts of contacts to voters. And sometimes they do not get the information right. And if voters see information that's questionable or isn't from an official source, go to the official source to check that out.
And so just to kind of elaborate on that, today is not the last day you can register to vote.
Today is not the last day you can register to vote. Today is the deadline if you want to register to vote online at myvote.wi.gov, or if you want to postmark your by mail application, today's the deadline. But after today, you can still, for the next few weeks, register to vote in your municipal clerk's office. And you can, of course, register to vote at the polls same day on election day here in Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. We'll now go over to Katrina Lim.
Hi there. Hope you could hear me. Thanks so much for having us. So yeah, I was wondering, we had a viewer question come in asking, what are voters allowed to wear at the polls when it comes to political attire? Some states, allow you to wear your political party affiliation. Some go as far as, not having a certain referendum or candidate preference. So what's kind of like, I guess, the dress code when it comes to voting in Wisconsin?
Yeah, so in the state of Wisconsin, electioneering at the polls is prohibited. So you should not be wearing anything or displaying anything that advocates for anything that's on the ballot. So any candidates, any referenda that are on the ballot, you should not be wearing apparel or making any sort of displays that are, indicating a preference for something that's on the ballot. And there is also an electioneering zone around a polling place. So you just have to make sure that, you're outside of the designated area, around a polling place to make any of those sorts of displays. If somebody does go to the polls and they are electioneering, the election inspector is going to ask them to, please remove the electioneering item. And then, allow them to proceed with voting or observing or whatever it might be. But yes, folks should not wear or make any sort of displays that advocate for a position or a party or a referenda that is on the ballot.
Okay, and that was going to be my next question. What should a poll worker do if they see someone wearing it? So instead of just telling them go home, just at least either cover it up, like wear a jacket or take off the hat or something.
Exactly. I think you're going to find our poll workers, they want people to get in and to be able to vote. And the goal is to get folks in and to be able to vote while also adhering to the law. And so, it's going to be a case-by-case situation. But I think that you'll find our poll workers and our chief inspectors, who are the ones that have the authority over the polling place, are going to be really trying to work with folks to make sure that they're not electioneering, which is a violation of the law, but also that they're able to exercise their right to vote efficiently. So some folks might not know, and so I'm sure the poll workers will be helpful to try to make sure that folks know what the law is and can comply.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for that question. And now we'll go over to Andrew Ball.
Hi there. Thanks for doing this. I just wanted to follow up on, you mentioned the reports from folks who have gotten misleading or intimidating texts or communications. Are there any specific claims that you've noticed that have really been gaining traction? I know there's been a bit of reporting on the text that said, don't vote in a state where you're not eligible, kind of targeting young people. Are there other things that you've noticed, gotten, reports about kind of causing problems?
So I don't know that there's been any others in particular. So we kind of talked about the ones that, might mislead folks to thinking that today is the last day to register, that you can't otherwise register after today. We've gotten some confusion around that. But, every general election, we see mailings, we see text messages from third-party groups that just don't get it right. And so, again, it's just about pointing people to the official source of information. But I can't think of any other specific examples of things that seem widespread or have had a lot of reports to our office.
Thanks for that question. And we'll go to Alex Scher.
Hey, Megan, had a question about a database called Parse that the MEC1 clerk is using. Parse is a DOT tool that displays people's citizenship at the time when they applied for a driver's license and ID, and she's using it to flag potential non-citizens. who have registered to vote. My question is, clerks are kind of asking her about the system. She seems to be telling a few clerks about it. What would you say to clerks who are considering using that system to flag potential non-citizens? Would you hesitate? Would you tell them to, not use it, or what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, like you said, it's a DOT database. And so I won't, opine on sort of the data that's within the DOT's database. That would need to be a question posed to them. In terms of clerks and their utilization of information to maintain the accuracy of Wisconsin voter rolls, they have the statutory ability to utilize reliable information in order to make determinations on if somebody's still an eligible voter in their community. There are then things like notice requirements. And so if a clerk is to use those data sources, they use other data sources too, like obituaries or other information from within their communities to make that determination. And so clerks know that they always have to look at the source of that data, and they have to make sure that that information is current, that it's reliable, and it's something that they can legally utilize to make that determination. So I don't know that there's a simple answer to that, because clerks have to oftentimes pair data from different sources in order to arrive at information that's reliable and is allowed to be used under law to change the status of a voter record.
Thank you for that question. We'll now go to WISC-TV News 3 now.
Hey, this is Will Keneally, if you guys can hear me. Thanks for doing this, really appreciate it. Couple of questions, if you don't mind. I'll start out with a security issue. Are you tracking any specific threats to like early voting locations with that kind of physical intimidation, or any threats to poll workers, election officials, including yourself at all?
We do not have any, intelligence reporting or information to lead us to believe that there will be any unusual threats. But, like we talk about, we're always thinking about what are our contingency plans and how would we handle different types of emergency situations. And so just because, there isn't any information to lead us to believe that this may happen doesn't mean that there aren't still plans in place and that we're not still prepared to be able to respond if something unexpected should happen. But no, we do not have any information or expectation of that.
Got it. And if you don't mind, just one other quick one. Do you have any kind of data tracking the number of clerks turning over? So this might be municipal clerks first election. And we'd also been looking at a report that looks at some of these local election officials who have since denied the result of the 2020 election. Is there anything that the WEC does to kind of foster at a state level the assurance for a local voter that their clerk is, following proper procedures?
Sure. So a couple of things. I don't have any numbers or data about the number of new clerks that we have. It's something that perhaps the Wisconsin Municipal Clerks Association or Wisconsin Towns Association might have a better idea on. But one thing I will say about that is, because Wisconsin is so decentralized, we have a municipal clerk that registers voters, runs the polling place, issues ballots in all 1,850 of our cities, towns, and villages. This is very different than other states where they might have 50 counties that administer elections. So because of our very decentralized system, in a lot of these small places, they're only employed by their town for maybe 5 hours a week, right? And so a lot of times these jobs do see a very high level of turnover in these small communities, because even if you're only compensated for 5 hours a week, it's a much bigger job than 5 hours a week in even these small communities. And so I guess I say that to just show that we already have built into our system the understanding that we're always going to have a lot of new clerks coming into the system. And so we do a wide variety of training. They're also required by law to do a bunch of training where we'll go out to their various associations and regions and do in-person training. We also have a huge online curriculum available to clerks so that they can watch all their training on their own time, because again, many of them are part-time. And then a lot of our counties also do additional training on top of that for their municipalities. And so I think our clerks are very well trained because we have such a multifaceted approach to it. And we're also able to very quickly add additional training. Like if there is some change to the law or new litigation, we have regular contacts with all of our clerk associations, and we can very quickly run up additional training to address those things. So our system is really resilient in that way, in that we've always had a lot of new clerks coming into the system, and we have a great onboarding process to make sure that they get the training they need to be able to run their election.
Second part to that, if you don't mind. So for a voter in Adams County, for example, who might have a local election official who has denied the results of the 2020 election, is there anything that you're doing with the WC at the state level to kind of provide that assurance to a local voter like that?
Well, I think that our process and our laws really provide that assurance. So election results have to be certified, reviewed by 3 levels of government. And so, you know, in terms of having to, you know, certify the election results in each of our communities, the law lays out what they're looking for during that public canvass in terms of making sure that the numbers make sense. And then they have a mandatory responsibility to make that certification. The same when those go to the county to be reviewed and certified, and then of course to the state to be reviewed and certified. And so I think that our decentralized system here makes us very strong, you know, because we have all of these levels of review and mandatory responsibilities to certify an election if the legal requirements have been met.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks for those questions. We'll now go to Mitchell Schmidt.
Yeah, hi Megan. Thank you very much for the time today. Just kind of a little bit of a forward-looking question. We've seen in recent presidential elections this misinformation regarding central count voting, particularly in Milwaukee. Are there any expectations that we may be hearing some of those rumors, conspiracy theories again this November? And is there any sort of an effort or message you would maybe convey to, you know, individuals out there who might be hearing that when it gets to November 5th?
Well, you know, I sure hope that we don't have the same claims because it's so easy to point out what the actual truth is. You know, with central count jurisdictions, and this is all in Wisconsin state statute. So with central count jurisdictions, and we have about 35 of them here in Wisconsin. First of all, they all count their absentees in one central location versus sending the absentees to each of their polling place to be counted on the same tabulators at the polling place with the in-person votes that day. And so with a central count jurisdiction, it means that, you know, all the absentees are not added to their individual wards from the polling places until all the absentees have been counted. So what happens is on election night, voters might be seeing, you know, media that's calling in the unofficial results coming from the polling places that doesn't yet include any of the absentees because they're all still being counted at central count, and the absentees will be added to their respective wards after they've all been finished. And so, you know, I've got a couple of thoughts on sort of, you know, how we can hopefully avoid this being the case going forward. The first is something I need, you know, the media's help with. And that is, I think voters really need more context about what they're seeing on election night. We put out a lot of information before the election, and I know many of you do too, trying to help voters understand what you're going to be seeing on election night. When you're seeing those unofficial totals, what does that mean, right? And so I think that's a big part of it, is we really need voters to be able to have, you know, through the media, the necessary context to know what they're looking at in terms of unofficial results on election night, and if those numbers do or do not include the absentee votes. Another thing about the central count jurisdictions and the number of absentee votes is the number of absentee votes that are going to be added to the respective wards is not a surprise to anybody. Each of the central count jurisdictions is actually required to post the number of outstanding absentee ballots that they have on election day on their website. So going into election day, we all know exactly how many absentee ballots can be added to the totals for Milwaukee or Green Bay or other jurisdictions that have central count. So that number is no surprise to anybody. We all know what that number is, what the realm of possibility is in terms of absentees that can be added to the totals. And finally, I'll say to folks that, may have questions or concerns about this process, about, absentee ballots, how they're counted and added to the totals. It's all publicly observable. And so I think, folks from both political parties across the political spectrum, nonpartisan folks, are all there at central count, watching the process as the ballots are counted. A lot of these places might even live stream their central count. And so there's just so much information to show exactly what's happening. And so we need people operating in good faith, engaging with these facts about elections. Hopefully we won't see these same old tired rumors about the process, because they're so easy to illuminate the truth.
Thanks for that question. We'll now go over to Corey Byers.
Hello, thank you for having this meeting. We're from Wausau, so we've had a lot of that Wausau mayor stuff going on. Our city clerk did say that she reported an election irregularity to the WEC. We were wondering just what you guys did with that, and if you guys have a statement on what has happened here in Wausau, specifically on the mayor moving the ballot box.
So we do not, and we also cannot comment on anything that could, come to the commission in terms of a administrative complaint under Section 505 or 506. And so that is not something that we can directly, comment on outside of that legal process. And in terms of when a clerk reports some type of instance of voter fraud or anomaly to our office, what happens with those. And what happens with those, depending on when they're issued to us, is it goes to the commission in the form of a report that they put out after each election that actually reports to the legislature and the public all of the instances of voter fraud that have been referred by the clerk to the district attorney. And so that's really what's happening here is, something like this. A clerk would make the referral. They're the ones that have the evidence of whatever it is that they're referring to the district attorney. They're then required to report that reporting to the district attorney to us, and then we file that with the legislature and for the public. And so the commission at their October 4th meeting did put out the most recent report on the instances of voter fraud and irregularities, and that is now available on our website and was sent to the legislature. In that particular case, I'm not sure that it made the cutoff before that report was produced. And so anything that was reported to our office after the last report was produced would be on the next report that will come out after the November election of any other instances.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And now we'll go over to Maya Pandy.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for doing this. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about when we can expect unofficial presidential and Senate results to roll in Wisconsin, and how long people should be prepared to wait for those unofficial results, and how that might compare to 2020.
So, just like you, I don't have any information to know exactly when jurisdictions will be done with their count. I think accuracy and integrity is always going to be guiding principles for our election officials, right? They want to make sure that they get it exactly right. In larger jurisdictions, they have more ballots to count, so it's going to take them more time to count them. I know that a lot of our jurisdictions have certainly made additional efficiencies, added additional, poll workers and things to their processes to try to make sure that they're able to keep up with the public's expectation that they get unofficial results as quickly as possible. But, I think you'll also see that election officials are not willing to sacrifice accuracy in order to be faster with results. So it will take as long as it takes to get it exactly right. And every step of that process, every ballot that's counted will be counted in the public eye. So there's really no secret over what's happening or why something is taking as long as it is. That's all observable and open to the public and the media to be a part of that as it's happening. So, like I said, I think our clerks have worked really, really hard to offer additional efficiencies, to increase the amount of staffing and things at their counting facilities. So, hopefully we will see accurate results as soon as possible on election night.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. It looks like we have one additional question from Cyria Sandlin.
Hi, thanks again, Megan. I just wanted to ask you a question. You talked about these text messages from third parties going out. Are you aware of the one that's been going out to college students, basically saying that they could be fined $10,000 or spend 3.5 years in prison if they vote in a state where they're not eligible? Does this seem some type of voter intimidation for college students?
So I don't know. And again, we really can't weigh in on anything that could come to the commission in the form of an administrative complaint outside of that process. But, just like probably all of you, I've seen the media reports on that as well. And I believe that we've had a couple of voters that have called our office expressing concerns over receiving that message as well. So, our best guidance to folks is, again, if you're getting these concerning or questionable contacts from third-party groups, I wouldn't trust that information. I would go right to the official source. I'd call your election official. And of course, if a voter feels like something that they've received constitutes as voter intimidation, they should also report it to their law enforcement as well so that they can look into it.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, and thank you all for joining today's media availability. If you do have further questions that come up, feel free to reach out to our media inbox. That's electionspio@elections.gov. Again, that's electionspio@elections.gov. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.